Hello and welcome to Inside Iraq. I'm Jassim Azzawi. 5 years ago, President Bush gambled his political fortune and the credibility of his country when he invaded Iraq. Saddam's regime was toppled under the pretext of disarming Iraq's weapons of mass destruction. The war on Iraq has put the entire region on a knife's edge. It has released hitherto unseen forces of sectarianism and inadvertently put out the welcome mat to Al-Qaeda to establish a foothold in Iraq, perhaps permanently. Today, Iraq is a strange mix of symbolic democracy and the Wild West, and no one can predict how the final chapter of this high-stakes drama will play out. A partitioned country, a model of democracy, or Iraq will descend into complete chaos and civil war. To discuss the lessons, impact, and future ramification of the war on Iraq on the 5th anniversary of the invasion of Iraq, I am delighted to welcome here in the studio Najib Al-Neaimi, the former Qatari Justice Minister, and Saad al-Din Ibrahim, Professor of Political Science and founder of Ibn Khaldun Center in Egypt, and Iraqi nuclear scientist Dr. Imad Khadduri, and from Baghdad, spokesperson of the U.S. Embassy in Iraq, Mirembi Nantengo. Welcome to all of you. Imad Khadduri, let me start with you. Looking at the profit and loss sheet of this American enterprise in Iraq, are we in the black or are we in the red?
We are in the definite red as concerning the educated and the professional cadre of Iraq. 300 academics have been murdered over the past year. 2,000 doctors have been killed. Out of 36,000 doctors in Iraq, half of them are now outside Iraq, 5,000 of them in the UK. There are 9,000, the Minister of Interior has estimated 9,000 false university degrees are now with people, with civil servants, even in the, with Al-Maliki's council. There are false degrees. The worst hit are the young people. About 1 million young Iraqi student age, boys and girls, are not attending a school. Only half of them who finish primary continue. There's 250,000 young Iraqis in Syria and Jordan as refugees. As of 2007, 50% of the professional cadre in Iraq, those who are doing running the ministries, are outside Iraq. This is definite red, not even, it's blood red as far as Iraq is concerned.
Mirembi, Dr. Imad Khadduri looked on the negative side of this American enterprise. I'm sure you will be highlighting the positive aspect of it. Perhaps I can help you by saying that Saddam's regime has been toppled. A lot of people, they look at it as a positive impact. There were several elections. There is a perceived notion of democracy in Iraq, perhaps symbolic, not full. In your assessment, do they outweigh what Imad Khadduri just drew a very bleak picture?
There's no question that the social upheaval has been extreme in Iraq due to the conflict and the lack of security that we have witnessed over the past several years. What I would like to highlight is the fact that over the past year, we have witnessed a dramatic change in the situation security-wise, and obviously security is at the bottom of everything. It's impossible to achieve any kind of progress on any other level until the security situation has reached some level of stability. And as I said, over the past few months, there have been dramatic gains in the field of security. I think our assessment is that over 60% reduction in levels of violence overall since June last year. And this, of course, has been due to a number of different factors: the coalition forces, Iraqi armed forces themselves, Iraqi citizens themselves, who have all participated in this new situation.
Mirembi alluded to the improved security, and David Petraeus just a couple of days ago mentioned that security in Iraq, especially in Baghdad, has improved. But he lambasted the Iraqi politician for not being able to take advantage of this breath, of this space of tranquility by coming into national reconciliation. Looking at the situation in Iraq, is security is going to be the determining factor? Things will happen or won't just because of that?
Well, as Mirembi said, security is essential. It is a necessary condition to do anything else. And politicians in Iraq are not much better than politicians in Lebanon or in any pluralistic society. The art of bargaining turn it into a profession, and they haggle over little things here, little things there.
Except in this case, there are thousands of lives at stake.
Absolutely, but the same thing in any pluralistic society. Yet politicians do not care. It is their gains. We have seen Kenya, we have seen Lebanon, we have seen several countries with similar situation. However, we are all hoping. I was in northern Iraq recently, about 6-7 months ago. I am hoping that at least one part of the country stabilizing will be a model for the rest of the country. And I think, I'm hopeful, I'm an optimistic by nature, and I think after all the calamities that Ahmed correctly talked about, Iraqis are pulling together, and I have seen Iraqis trying to make the best out of a bad situation.
That is one look, Dr. Najib Al-Neaimi. I'm sure you have a different assessment. With militias are all over the country and insurgency is raging for the past 3-4 years. Do you share that rosy assessment? Things are just around the corner?
No, I don't. In fact, the question is very simple. Why Bush administration had to invade Iraq? Why? Unstable system.
Are you questioning the legality of that decision?
Definitely, because we have to understand one thing. Under the international law, Iraq still occupied even after 5 years. Though they made some kind of election, so-called election, still the conclusion, Iraq still under occupation. Still the American is running the demonstration, the administration on the top of it. They represent them around the world. They're still trying to manage the security side. They are trying to manage the economical side. They try to manage whatever's there. So Iraq is still, what we call it, there is a vacancy of real sovereign governments as the one which was actually being abolished by the Americans.
Mirembe, you must have heard that before. That is, even the current political leadership in Iraq is illegal simply because the basis upon which this enterprise unfolded is illegal. The administration did not go to the UN Security Council for a second resolution when the French, they threatened that they will not support a military action.
Jassim, it's tremendously important that this period of history, as in any critical period of history in our civilization, it should be studied, that it should be debated. It's something that we can draw lessons from as a global society for years to come. And this is an important process which has already been undertaken. It has been begun by historians, by academicians, by think tanks everywhere. For us here, as part of the team on the ground, under the leadership of Ambassador Crocker, what we are focusing on is dealing with the challenges and the opportunities that are presented by the situation on the ground as it is now.
That is a very clear admission by the American administration. The embassy, they are the one who's running the whole show in Iraq. This is not a sovereign state.
No, as I said,
under
excuse
occupation.
me, I said what we are doing, what we are focusing on is trying to find the best ways to support the Iraqi government and the Iraqi people.
Why don't you leave them alone and withdraw?
Their country into the future.
No. Why don't you leave them and withdraw from Iraq and let them manage themselves? I don't think so. Iraq has a history.
The point is
really
that
thousands of years they manage themselves. If we go through the history of Iraq, we find it being occupied a number of the last was the British, and they managed after the British to run their own what we call a society. Leave them alone. Get out.
Let me bring Dr. Saadeddin Ibrahim. Looking at those 5 years, if you don't mind, Mirembe, just hold on just a second. One could say with fairness that every conceivable mistake that should have been avoided, as a matter of fact, it was committed. Whether it's the abolishing of the Iraqi army and so on and so forth, we don't have time to outline them all. Was that a result of naivety or not knowing Iraq, or was that simply because it was mismanaged war, as Madeleine Albright said?
It was all the above. It was out of ignorance and out of arrogance. I remember in the early days, I was just coming out of prison myself. I made a trip to the States. I met several of the administration. having known Iraq, having lived in Iraq, having actually advised Saddam Hussein myself, I was giving them at least my own assessment as an observer, as a student of the Middle East, of the Arab world. But they were in no mood to listen. Only a year later, when I saw Mr. Wolfowitz again, he said, I wish we did listen. So yes, all the mistakes that you could think of were committed. They were misled, and there was arrogance, there was ignorance, and I say that whatever happened will be, as Mrembi said,
Dr. Saaduddin Ibrahim, perhaps the genesis of all these mistakes is the reason behind going to war. When we come back after the break, I'm going to ask an Iraqi nuclear scientist whether WMDs lied at the very heart of that fateful decision. Please stay with us.
Failure in Iraq would increase the probability that at some later date American troops would have to return to Iraq to confront an enemy more dangerous and more entrenched. Failure in Iraq would send an unmistakable signal to America's enemies that our country can be bullied into retreat.